Rahul back, man. Rahul back.
Hey, Rahubat, Rahubat. How you doing?
I'm feeling well, man. Feeling well. How are you?
Doing my best. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Yeah, definitely. Man, this is like I wasn't waiting for this one-on-one for a long time.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's here.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you don't mind, just for the listeners, introducing yourself, where you're chiming from, and yeah, how you came across me, Wu-Sabat, and just a little background about yourself, and yes, and then we can get into it. You can ask me anything. We have a conversation and see where it takes us.
Okay. Well, for me, I always been unconscious, you know what I'm saying? Born out of California in the 90s. I was into like heavy into gangsterism and stuff like that. It wasn't until Sarnetta TV. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Sarnetta.
Yeah, and so I actually woke up and be like, oh well, the stuff that I'm doing could be harming my community. You know what I'm saying? So
Right, right.
so I
Hmm.
got into that. So I got into deeper um history of just my culture and stuff like that and other cultures, and I just started expanding my horizon of of knowledge. And
Right.
so it reached after that, I meet this guy named Brother Polite.
Yep, I'm familiar with Brother Polite.
Yeah, yeah. So Brother Polite, he was a very good debater around that time, and he said something about Malachi Ziort, and I always had that in the back of my mind of Malachi Ziort.
Right.
But yeah, so then I looked, and there was actually a thing like Nubian Nation. I even seen Nubian Nation on Sinetta TV, and I was just like fascinated with ancient Egypt culture. But at the time, I was actually Christian until I eventually dive in more and more knowledge until I'm like, okay, let me slide into ancient Egypt, which is bring me to my point where not point, but would bring me
So
to where
when you
I am
say you were
now.
Christian,
Yeah.
what part of what kind of Christianity or Christian were you, would you say?
As a child, I was Christian, like, going to the church and stuff like that until I ventured off from Christianity, then became a Hebrew Israelite. Then
Okay.
at the Hebrew Israelite, I venture off into Kmetic science or Egyptology. And this is where I'm kind of like am now in a sense.
Right. Hmm.
And so I met this community who said that a lot of stuff from the Bible is actually rooted in Kmetic history. So, right now I'm kind of like diving into that, but I'm with this community that says that, you know, if you change the version, not the version, but you change the certain names of the Bible or certain family lineage, you'll find out that it's actually talking about Kemetic history.
Mm.
So right now I'm dealing with that, and of course with Wasabat, and finding out the science of Malachi York because when I looked at him, not and dig deep into it to what he was, I was like, wow, the guy is very very smart, and so he must have some good knowledge of what's going on. So this is
Mm.
where I am now.
Okay. How did you come across us, or as in um
Oh, for you?
the channel? Yeah, yeah. It's always
Uh,
interesting to find out how we're reaching people, so that's interesting.
cool. I can't remember per se. I
Okay.
just know that it was before you hit 100,000 subscribers.
Oh, okay, right. All
Man,
right,
when
okay.
I seen when I once I no, I believe I seen this video you used to do a live stream. He's like, answer, you can call
Oh,
whatever.
okay. Ask us anything. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I seen the WhatsApp, and I'm like, yeah, I got WhatsApp, so I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and call him, and that's
Right.
how it started.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, I mean we're just student teachers of Partner Babyanun, the master teacher, and you've mentioned people like, you said Polite and a few others. Yeah, they are also, their foundation and the source of their teachings is from Partner Babyanun, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. So we always have to, give homage and give, like just yeah, just love to him. Because without him, we won't be here doing what we're doing. So
True.
we just want to acknowledge that. And of course, um, our number one priority is to get him home, get him home with us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
That's why I wanted to do this one-on-one interview with you. And kind of like pick your brain on, Malachi York, your foundation and stuff like that.
Sure.
And
Hmm.
over to Europe. But speaking of that, like what is your background, man? Like how do you came into the knowledge?
I mean, if you watch that very first video we dropped on OSM Vision, God numbers and the universe explained, and I've kind of said it a number of times as well. Like yourself, I came from a Christian background simply because my parents were into Christianity. Yeah, as a child, I used to go to church with them, but it never resonated. I always had questions within myself, and so I would literally look around nature, look around, just trying to figure out like where are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? And then I would look up in the sky, look at the stars, and just always had some kind of connection with looking at the stars and wondering like what's up there. And as time went on, I stopped going to church, and then as a teenager, as you're growing up, you're more with, like you say, with your friends, you're on the streets, and you just living life, and getting into crime, getting into just trouble as a teenager, and like always felt like someone was, I don't know, looking over you, like you always seem to get protected. And then how did I come on? Yeah, so, right. So I was, one of my brothers had given me at the time we had like these cassettes, audio tapes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was working on my computer at the time and listening to this tape in the background. And then it the person speaking, I didn't know who it was, but of course I learned that it was Malachi. But the person speaking just grabbed my attention so much, like I literally stopped what I was doing, and I remember just turning around to like the hi-fi or the radio or whatever it was, and I was like, oh my goodness, now that's somebody that knows what they're talking about on this planet. Now I literally said that's one person on this planet who, because up until that point I didn't know anyone else who was speaking truth. But
Hmm.
I had heard of Farrakhan, so when I heard the American accent, I just automatically thought it was Farrakhan. And then after that, he had given me a book. It's called Back to the Beginning, the Book of Names, my very first book that I read. And it was white. It had a white cover with black writing, and when I started to read it, it was just like boom, like it was talking about who we were, where we came from. We spoke about the transatlantic so-called slave trade, and then I kind of like put it away for a while, but because I was still on road with my friends and stuff, and then but it wouldn't go away. So then I came across some brothers on the street that were propagating. They had a table, and they were like, no, in fact, before that, I'm into music as well as like musician, producer. We were in the studio, and we had an artist that came to the studio to record a rapper, and there was this person that I didn't know if it was their manager or something, but they were from America, but they were into Sunni Islam, as I got to find out later on. And after the studio session, we went to my business partner's place, and we were like, and everyone came. We had something to eat, and then I don't know what happened. We started talking about consciousness and stuff, and the artist that we were working with, her boyfriend had come to the house to pick her up, and but he was dressed in all white, and so that when we're having this this discussion, I don't think I've actually said this in public on air, but during the discussion, it was clear to me that the American guy that was Sunni, he was a Sunni Muslim, and then you had this Nagaru, that came, and he was Ansarullah. But I didn't. All of this was, I didn't know all of this at the time. So, but what was very clear was during the conversation, debate, whatever you want to call it, it was so clear that the brother in white, the Ansar, he literally was just like, yeah, tearing up the Sunni Muslim. So I left that like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And then I started to, I saw the brothers on the street, recognized they were also dressed the same way, started to speak to them, got some books, started to go to class. And yeah, every time I went to class, I just got all my questions answered. And I was one of those people that would study. Like I would go away, read, study, come back to class, ask questions. Yeah, and that's how my journey started. And then I came into the community, and yeah, it's just been no one that I could compare or put questions to other than Malachi's books, and eventually, obviously, got yeah, just
And it
got to
took off
connect
from
with
there.
him, and that, yeah, took up from there. And I've been reading and studying ever since, and I just know he's the truth. And
Okay.
nothing, no one else on this planet has ever been able to, yeah, do what he does. And I'm not the only person. When I started to, meet other people, talk to, yeah, people that have been around him. Yeah, so
So,
that's, yeah, go
so,
ahead.
so my question is that, so I noticed that you said that, they turn off Islam, and you noticed that Dr. York was telling the truth to you.
Mm.
Before you kind of like reached to Dr. York, did you believe that Jesus Christ was crucified? And what are your thoughts on it now?
No, that's what I'm saying. I couldn't resonate with Christianity at all. So, like I said, I'm a person that thinks, and when you're a thinker, you contemplate and you like try and make things make sense. And it didn't make sense that this person supposedly came to remove sin from the world, but yet the world was just still chaotic and in chaos, and there were still wars and all kinds of stuff in the world that it didn't add up. Like, okay, so what was the point of him coming and being crucified and dying for our sins? So, like I said, I used to go to church and see the statues and then the images, and they didn't connect with me. They didn't resonate with me. In fact, the person didn't even look like me. So, yeah, I never did. And obviously, by reading Dr. York's books and listening to his audio recordings, he answered those questions and he clarified, the whole thing about that Jesus, well, it depends on which one we're talking about, because there are
Right.
so many for a start and different perspectives, and like no one can agree within the Christian world, even like what they say. And so I never did, and I still don't. And Dr. York clarified it in terms of the stories and how this is another thing as well, that when you're in a religious constitution, organization, or whatever, it's like they don't really promote you looking outside of what they believe
Outside
and
of the
what they
Bible.
accept. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you start to recognize that, oh, it's not actually the original or the first, or that there were other cultures that had similar stories, it leads you to, as you say, to Kemet or to ancient Egypt. So then you start to see like, okay, if this happened before, and this is kind of a relaying of the same story, it just makes sense that the one that was before was where they got it from or where it was copied from. I mean, for
Right.
example, like the whole crucifixion story, many people don't realize that when they're reading and talking about that in the New Testament, as they call it, that Psalms 22 in the Old Testament already has the exact same story. All you have to do is just read it through. It's talking about the crucifixion of David in that. And it's exactly the same story that's been copied over into what they say in the New Testament, that is Jesus being crucified.
Yeah, for me, my biggest awakening away from the Christianity was the fact of Moses. You know, the Moses
Right.
in ancient Egypt, and then he's like, "Where's Moses at?" You looking all over for Moses. Oh yeah, there's close to Moses. There's topmost. There's
Hmm.
almost, but it's never that Moses that they refer to. It's just like, okay,
Right.
so where
Hmm.
he's at, and that's when it kind of got me out of that because
Mm.
it's only one person that fits this Moses character, but it's definitely not the Moses that the Bible speak of.
Right.
But
And also they don't produce any evidence of, like that was another thing where they were able to talk about the pharaohs in Egypt and dig up the remains and, present them in museums and so on and have even DNA tests and stuff, right, to prove that these people were here, they walked the planet, they existed. But none of the Bible characters had the same thing. Couldn't dig them up and present them. So that was another thing that was like very weird and strange.
yeah. So
Mm.
how do you feel about my community? My community is based off ancient Egypt, but we think
Sorry,
that
what is your community? 'Cause you haven't really told me.
oh yeah, so like my community is like based off ancient Egypt. We think that the Bible, especially the Septuagint, is actually the
No, I
history
mean,
of
what are you called?
oh
What is your community? And who's
people
the
people people call us like Egyptian Israelites.
okay? Hmm.
But we just more Kmetic. But we are a different type of Kmetic community. We
Right.
don't we think of the mythology of ancient Egypt like the Book of the Dead.
Mm.
Yeah, for us, we think that the Septuagint is actually the history of ancient Kemet. It's to the point now that we have a close to a version that brings it back to its Kemetic roots. So I wanted to know what your thoughts on that. Do you think
Okay, I
that
mean, like, you may have to give me a little bit of background about your community, because I'm not familiar with it in the sense of like how it was founded, who's the founder, when did it start, and do you guys have any, books or like how did it all come about? If you could just give me a little bit about
right
information.
now it's just a group of us, it's just a community, and we realize it's like
Right,
okay,
so you just came together as just a
yeah,
group
yeah,
of
just
people,
came together
right?
as a group. Yeah. And like we
Right.
see stuff that's similar to the Bible. Like for instance, Adam and Atum, Atum.
Mm,
These two people are the same ones. Like when you say Adam, where's Adam anywhere in history, right? Where can
mm.
you find Adam? Adam. But if you look at Atom, it's like, okay, we can find Atom and both of them have the same similar stories.
Yeah, I
Um,
hear you. Okay,
yeah, so like
now I got
Atom.
a better idea. Yeah, so you see, the thing is that with religion, pretty much all of the monotheistic religions, including whatever flavor of Christianity, whether it's Hebrew Israelites or the Israeli Church or the many denominations of Christianity, Islam, all the denominations of Islam, and any flavors, whether it's Nation of Islam or any group out there, the reality is that what makes them authentic is when they tie back into Egypt. It's like none of these groups, organizations, I mean, although you have some so-called Israelites who, because of the Bible, look at the Egyptians as not being them, or that the Egyptians are the adverse to the Israelites, and the Israelites are the heroes, and the Egyptians are the villains, and so forth. But the reality is that to make things authentic, everyone ties back into Egypt. And people can talk about Egypt, and there are many books. You have many people, Dr. Ben Diop, Henry Clark. There's so many writers that have written books about Egypt. But none of these groups have actually resurrected Egypt and lived the culture. And none of them have the language, you see. So language is very key when you start to, like you were just saying, looking at words. And if you're a linguist, it's very easy to, as you say, look at words and look at the etymology of words and tie it back to, okay, where does this come from? And that's one of the advantages of Wu-Sabat and Nuapu, or Sabians, Nuapians. It's about, first of all, recognizing who was here first, who wrote things first, who recorded things first, who has evidence first, and bringing us all together based on the fact that we're related by DNA, right? First,
Right.
before any separations, before any I'm this, I'm a that. Right? That's where Wu-Sabat is like, look, let's come together as a family. It's not even disputed anymore that the Africans were first. You can use that term just loosely, but we can go, like you say, into ancient Kemet, go into pre-dynastic, and we go all the way back before anybody was on the planet, back to our ancestors from, you know, the stars.
Right.
So we have to really unite and then look at, okay, who is the guide, who's the teacher, who has the information, not to only teach and write books about it, but to actually resurrect the culture that you can live it. You know, the way you look, the way you dress, the way you speak, the food you eat, the language, everything, you know, like that's where Wu Sabat is like, okay, we know there are different groups, and if you're all getting together to organize, you know, because there's power in numbers and you're all studying together, and then eventually that will bring you to come together under the umbrella of Wu-Sabat, because that is the source, you know. So it's great what you're doing. It's good to get a tribe together. So you organize, you're studying, you're relating to each other, you start to eat right, you know, you're doing the right things. And it's just like someone who was a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, if they were actually sincere and they were practicing it correctly as to the best of their knowledge, and actually, you know, because the things that unite us are more greater than the things that separate us. So, you know, things like treating people well, mindfulness, being compassionate, caring, loving, a shook, as we say, all those things are great qualities. So that when you finally come together, you've already got the foundation and the basics, you know, and the rest are just like semantics in terms of, okay, you know, what name do we use for this? What name do we use for that? What do we do in this situation?
All right.
And that's where the culture comes in, because we'll be like, okay, this is what we did in ancient times, and we
Okay.
show you and practice it. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So let me ask you this. I noticed that, you said that Dr. York was able to speak multiple languages, right?
Right.
Can he also speak Egyptian?
Cool. Good question. The thing that when we explain that Dr. York's able to speak many languages, first of all, he studied languages. He's a linguist. He went to university, the
Oh,
University
wow.
of Khartoum, and he's got his degrees from studying languages. So it's just like anyone else on the planet. When you have a subject that you're passionate about and you study and you get qualifications in it, and you know you're recognized as an expert in that field. So the second point is that when you do study languages, because one of the things he encourages everyone to do from the get-go was to study the language, because he's like, you're reading a book that you're calling the Bible, the Quran, etc., which is a translation, and somebody had to do the translation. And where did they translate it from? And how are you going to know in English what they're telling you this word means if you don't study languages? So if
Right.
you look at any of his books throughout, even from the really small pamphlets, or what we used to call the $5 scrolls, he would give you translation and tell you, go and check it out, look it up for yourself. Now, if you study languages and you start to look at etymology and study the roots, you'd go to the very first language, because that would tell you where all the other languages came from, you see. So when people say Egyptian language, for example, you will say, what do you call Egyptian language? And the reality is that people are talking about the hieroglyphics that are written on the walls of Egypt, right? Now, when you say, what is the spoken language of that? The best people will get to is what they call the metoneta. Now, even those words are translations. And so the hieroglyphics are not, it wasn't a completely spoken language, even though eventually people were making sounds from the glyphs. But then if you say, okay, go to another culture, go somewhere else, and they will be like, okay, cuneiform or the cuneiform, as they say, which again is Greek, which is describing the wedge-shaped strokes that you see in the cuneiform, because you got a lot of the Akkadian tablets. So what Dr. York was able to do is say, look, these are scripts. There are many types of scripts. Even Arabic has many scripts. Hebrew has different scripts. But the oldest scripts are going to be the hieroglyphics, which then go into the spoken language was what we're speaking today called Mispatia. But when you study and do the research, you find out that it will take you to places like what they're calling ancient Ethiopia, to the Nile Valley, to what they're calling like Meroe, Napata, Sabian, and then you can break down the word Sabaik, which becomes Nuapic, that comes from the stars and it was brought down here. So when you're saying Egyptian language, you're really talking about Nuapic, or obviously depending on which culture you come from, it's known by different names. So Nuapic would be one of the names, Sabaik would be one of the names, Napatian, and we say Mispatia because it was brought down here from the stars, from the Orion and the Sirius star constellation, because this is the language that is spoken in the different planets and galaxies. It's spoken on Mars, it's spoken in, different people speak it. So the hieroglyphics and the cuneiform are both scripts of the same language. That's what people will be referring to as Egyptian language. But yeah, there wasn't like a
Uh,
spoken language of the Egyptians other
okay.
than Nawapic.
So if the Nuwapic or Nuwabian or the Miss Bacteria, sorry for
That's okay.
mispronouncing it, language is the original language of the universe.
Sorry,
How
that's the
come?
point I made by saying that is that then you can see how all the other languages come from it. This is
Yeah.
why you will be able to speak more than one language, because you can see like when you have the branches, like the Arabic, like the Hebrew, you can kind of see where they all come from. And hence, knowing that first language, you'll be able to kind of speak any other language that kind of comes from it because you can hear it and see the similarities. Sorry, I
Right.
interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah. That's why I just wanted to know if the Nuwabian language is the original language, right? How come there's no alien civilization ever sent something like a Rosetta Stone back to like, hey, this is in case they forgot their
But what
language.
they have, and that's even when this is what I'm saying is like when they don't have to send a stone, because you have a whole culture or civilization that was here on the planet, like ancient Egypt. You can go and look at the pyramids, look at the obelisk, look at there are lots of writings all over that area that people have found. So it's not just a stone, it's like the entire every tomb you go into, this language is written on the wall. It's the same when you go into, what they call Sumer today, or ancient Shinar, or Iraq, where they've found so many tablets, you see, the cuneiform tablets. So the Rosetta Stone is just one of those things that, yes, our ancestors actually, they did that to throw the European or the colonizers off, because you see different scripts on the Rosetta Stone. And it was designed kind of like you're trying to find something, because even when you start to study the hieroglyphics, and you will see like it can be written left to right, right to left, up, down, up. So unless you could decipher that, you might be reading a message going from left to right, thinking that's the right message. But it could be the message encrypted, where you read a part up, then you read to the left, then you read down, then you read, you see what I'm saying? So it was very smart of our ancestors that put things together, but only people who could decipher the encryption, so they will get parts or bits of it, and then they couldn't make out the rest. So yeah, that's one of the things they did, because we were actually ambidextrous. We used to write in any direction. We use both
Right.
our arms and write in any direction, up, down, left, right. It's when the planet had that incident with what people know as the crash of Nibiru, it got tilted, and it went on a 23-degree axis, And that's why most people became right-handed, because when the planet shift, the beings also shifted. So majority of people on the planet are right-handed because the weight changed. But now it's actually kind of going back to its original axis. But you obviously you have people that are left-handed, but the majority, you would say probably 70 to 80% of people on the planet are right-handed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true, man.
And you stop and
Wow.
you always kind of lean and lean to the right if you study it. Yeah.
So, how do you explain the Book of the Dead and the history it brings? Do you also believe do you also believe what's in the text? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Again, any book you mention today, there are so many different versions now, like because people come along and try to translate, as I was saying before, or give you their version. So you have to then do the study, like, okay, why is it called the Book of the Dead? What's the origin of it? Where did it come from? And who wrote it, etc. And as you know, Dr. York, what he did as part of cleaning up the mess and what he referred to as setting the record straight, he actually has translated or received or transmitted without biasness all the books. So if you come from like, religious background, he's already translated, because people forget that whatever they're reading in their hands today is not the original, it's a translation. Whether it's the King James version, whether it's going to be some Yusuf Ali Quran or whoever, there's a translation and somebody translated it. So in this, but the people that have translated the books before Dr. York were not of our color or of our kind. So they will have, to a certain degree, some kind of biasness where they're going to make it in favor of their own, because, you look at the images, you look at what they talk about, it's all going to be either from a European perspective, from a, an Asian perspective. And then Dr. York came on the scene, was like, okay, I'm a linguist, I've studied this, I can translate and give us a much more better version. So he translated the book of what people call in the Book of the Dead, which is actually called the Coming Forth by Day. So it became the Book of the Dead through people that didn't understand or know what it was about. So they were like, they're finding these writings in the sarcophagus of pharaohs and people, and they're like, oh, this is the dead man's book because it's included within the burial rites and rituals. So it
Right.
became known as the Book of the Dead, or the Dead Man's Book. So sorry, I have some alarm coming up. Yeah, so then he translated the Torah, which is the five books of Moses. So anybody who is coming from the Old Testament perspective, at least they'll be like, this is the most authentic version given to us by us and not from other people. He did the same with the Quran. He did the same with the Psalms. He did the same with the Injil. He did the same with pretty much all the scriptures, going back to the, like you said, original tablets that are available. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
so he's actually got a book called The Coming Forth by Day, and he's showing you how this is what got grafted into the different versions that people are following today, and that, like the negative confessions and things like that, they make their way into religion, into like the Ten Commandments and all these kind of things. Then he's like, there were actually more, there were 713 commandments, not just the 10 that now
Wait.
somebody has brought over, So yeah, so we have, fortunately, we have all the books. When I do my live, you normally see I have a stack of the books. All those books are the books I'm talking about. So yeah, we're aware of the Coming Forth by Day, which was really talking about our Egyptian culture and ancestors and how we did things, dealing with like justice with my app, and just things, how we lived, and respecting natural nature and so forth. So yes, we subscribe to the facts of any book that
Right.
is presented. But what happens is that when people present a poor translation or a poor version, and they don't allow you to like scrutinize and question them on it, and when you do, if they can't back it up, then That's where it gets into, arguments and stuff. But we're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
if you have a group and you're using a European or an Asian version of a translation, then you're not really you're still under somebody else's kind of control or spell, you know.
right.
And if you check out when Dr. York writes his books, he will give you a quote from the most popular ones that people are familiar with. So if it's a King James, he will quote King James version, whatever date it is, give you that translation, show you word for word how the Hebrew is, and then you can now with technology
Yeah,
just get an app
true.
and check it out for yourself.
Yeah,
So
because
he's
he
not
don't seem like
saying,
he try to deceive you or anything
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
exactly. He's not saying just listen to me and follow me, but look at my translation, look at the others' translation, and see which one makes more sense. And then, you
Mhm.
kind of know make a judgment for yourself. Yeah.
True, true. And I agree with you, man. I think a lot of white historians or white authors or linguistics
Mm,
might have a bias into that. And I think that bias might be like mythology inside of ancient Egypt, you
that's
know.
right. That's right.
And I think it's causing chaos between ancient Egypt because ancient Egypt and black people today because of this misinterpretation. Um,
Absolutely.
which
And
is
and
like,
the yeah, and the thing is that as you say, it's like why why would the slave master have an interest in telling you the truth when you were before them? They come along, take that which you had originally. They can't quite decipher it because they don't have the ability to pronounce certain tones, right? This is where, like we say, the words got messed up because in order to pronounce certain tones, you need to have, the way your throat is, like the way you say like certain things you can't. So when they can't pronounce it, they will say it in the way that they can and it's comfortable. And this is how you will take a word and then it will become something else completely because they couldn't decipher it or pronounce
right.
it. So then it's like,
You know what we call that?
you
We call
go.
that whitewashed.
Exactly. Right. So then you're millions of years before, they come along like 6,000 years ago or whatever, and they tell you this is what it means. And they tell you you're now qualified because you've gone to their universities and they gave you a certificate to say you're now an Egyptologist. It's like, come on, man, it's
Yeah,
back to front. So when people do that, you have to say, look, we were here before you. You can't come and teach us about us when you weren't even around. You see, so
true.
it's kind of back to front. So yeah, we don't listen to now that like what the European so-called scholars because people be like, where does Dr. York get his information from? And we're like, where does anybody else on the planet get their information from? Because the same people you're looking up to as the translators, the scholars, they don't have your best interest at heart. They don't want to make you know you're the originals, you're the gods and the goddesses that existed and walked the planet and did the great things. Why? Because they want to subjugate you and have you thinking you're inferior and then make you into a slave and then they dictate and control what you do with your life until you say, nah, that ain't going down like that.
Right,
We're
right.
not going to have that no more. We've done it for too long and it hasn't got us anywhere. So it's about time we give them back their stuff and come together and then live our culture and practice our stuff based on our knowledge that we had before anybody else walked the planet. You see?
True, true, true indeed. So,
Mm.
what do you think of what they said about ancient Egypt? That they have homosexuality in its deities. I'm
Right.
not saying what I mean by homosexual activity. I'm not saying that the Egyptians are as a whole
No, I
homosexual.
get what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm
It's
saying in the
yeah, it's
homosexuality and
distortion.
deity thing.
But what happens is that's another distortion because before we got introduced to these things, right, by Europeans, by other cultures that came into Egypt with their practices, and because they lived amongst us, they started to do some of these things, and some of our people then got, caught up in it. That didn't exist in our culture. So when people say ancient Egypt, this is again the problem because what time period are we talking about? What are you calling ancient Egypt? because you've got foreigners in Egypt now that are claiming to be Egyptians. So
True.
someone will say ancient Egypt and go to a time period where you had like, Phoenicians
White
and
skin,
yeah,
Middle
exactly. The
Easterns.
Hyksos dynasty, and they brought with them these perversions and certain things. They will even go and say, "Oh, we found evidence in Egypt, like the Turin papyrus," and say, "Oh, this is what Egyptians were practicing." Right? Which Egyptians? You see, so we're not those Egyptians. In fact, we didn't call ourselves Egyptians. That's from Greeks, Aegyptos, or describing people that came into Egypt and the sun burnt them because they didn't have melanin or they were lack melanin, and they were referred to as Aegyptos, meaning burnt faces because they were getting burnt by the sun. This is why you see on the walls of Egypt, you see the different shades and the different colors. And there was a whole wall where it explained the gravitation of these beings, right? And so people have to be clear when they say ancient Egypt. We say, okay, the dynastic periods that most people are familiar with, the 46 dynasties, these are the times when you had different rulership, different people over the different dynasties. Some of these dynasties, some of these pharaohs, they kind of like embraced other cultures and opened the immigration rules and allowed people to come in, like Khufu being one of those. And when these people came in, they had brought their traditions and practices and certain things, and then it became a part of that period in Egypt. We say go back pre-dynastic, go back to the time where Egypt was purely inhabited by the original people, which we go to the Pataites or go to like the little people. They don't go down that far. They stop and just talk about Cleopatra, Mark Antony, and even when you study what they call Egyptology, it's like they take you down a particular path and avoid going down another path where it becomes all dark, all black, and dealing with the original people. So yes, we're not saying you can't now find. It's like we live in what they call, the Western world now, where you have black people or Nagaru who now are practicing and doing things that like we respect animals, but we never had dogs and live with dogs in our house and let them sleep in the bed and kiss them in the mouth and lick them and do all the stuff that a culture that you're in does. But now you see people that are integrating into that culture that are gonna do these things. And some of us will be looking at that like it doesn't resonate with our DNA and our genetics. We'll be like, oh, why are you doing that? We had dogs, but they were used for their purpose and they were not in the house. They had their own, you know what I'm saying? You look at the jackal like Anubu or Anubis. That's where you're getting the dog from because they had certain abilities and they can hear and sense things and so forth. So now you're living in the West and you're starting to do as the Romans and the Greeks do, and that's not really you. So that's what happened in Egypt, where yeah, foreigners came in, and those things started to happen, and yeah, and it kind of spread. Just like now, you have people that are practicing all types of sexuality, which they may just find it because of society and everything like, oh, it's fine to do this and do that without
Right,
really
right.
understanding or knowing the sciences of it. Yeah.
True indeed, true indeed. Okay, okay. Yeah, for me, I always think there's two different distinguish two different kinds, pretty much. When he's
Mm,
talking about ancient Egypt, there's Egypt, which is like, you have modern day Egypt, then you have Kemet, and then
mm,
you go, that's when Akhenaten, and then you might have something else even further from that.
right.
But but let's talk about uh Dr. York, right?
Hmm.
Uh, a prophet is someone who tells the future in a supernatural way. A retrocognizant is I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but a retrocognizant is
Mm,
someone who can tell the past in a supernatural way.
mm.
Do you think that Dr. York is a reconnaissant or a prophet or both?
That word prophet is actually quite funny because when you say prophesize, and again, when you go into the language, you get different words for what you're talking about. You got like predictions. But the thing is, what people are calling prophecies and predictions and even miracles are scientific things that you can do if you know the knowledge and how to do it, right?
Right.
So today you will get a weather report. They're going to tell you what the weather is going to be like for the next few days or the whole week.
The
Or
profits. I'll play.
right now, you're going to say these are prophets because they can tell you, next on Wednesday it's going to rain, it's going to be 23 degrees, it's going to be this and that, and so you can plan if you're going to go for a picnic or whatever, right? So,
Right.
are they prophets?
No, but that's why I say supernatural way.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have technology, right? They have satellites and they have things that read and can predict the likelihood. It's if you study anything to do with technology, computers, there's a whole subject on science dealing with how you can predict things, right?
Right.
And it's probabilities, right? So the more information you have over a period of time, you're likely to be able to predict the outcomes of what's going to happen next. I'll give you a good example. If you've studied the stock market for many years, you see the trends. You see when the market goes up and you see when the market goes down. You see what conditions cause an effect. Like if there's a war or something happening in the country, or like now, right? You have Mr. Trump and Elon Musk now are no longer as close. They're having their little conflict at the moment. What
Right.
happens? The Tesla stocks drops. So I'm saying that to say, when you
Trust me, I
study,
know. I lost a lot of money.
right, if you if you study things over a long period of time, you're able to literally become a prophet because you'll be like, I've seen this before. When that happens and that happens and that aligns, this is the result. This is why we say, as ontologists, beings that have been here for millions and millions and millions of years, we've seen the patterns over and over again. We know the cycles. We know when things align and what's going to happen. We know cause and effect. So when you look at that and you're like, someone that has only been around for 6,000 years, they don't have the amount of data that you have for being here. In fact, we don't even have a birth date because no matter how far back you go, you're going to find us. We're going to be there wherever you go on the planet, right? So we have records that the world do not have, and we are able to tell you the outcome of what's going to happen. This is what science is about. This is what experiments are about, right? Scientists, they will go about trying to prove an outcome based on, like, they will say, I wonder if we can make something that can fly and carry people from one place to the other. Then they do the research. They study birds. They study, how birds are able to take off. And then they go and try and they do experiments. First, a man will just like tie something to his arms and jump off a cliff. That's not going to work. But over time, people will, learn and then they'll go, oh, look, the ancient ones did it like this and it was successful. So I'm saying that to say, when you're dealing with Dr. York and dealing with an extraterrestrial and dealing with us as beings that predate what you're calling time, right? Because time is a construct. You're only saying today is today and using a calendar and using a time because it's been put together. Like, oh, the planet travels around the sun. It takes 365 days a year. And, we break that up into months and then we say into
All right.
minutes,
I,
hours.
I didn't
Sorry.
mean to interrupt you, but I was saying that as Dr. York, what do you think of him being a retrocognizant, somebody who could tell the
This is what I'm
past?
going to. I'm trying to say
Okay,
to
okay,
you
my bad.
that,
Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, because when you say Dr. York, people are only looking at the person, the physical person, right? But like all of us, we have other counterparts, spiritual counterparts. We have what we call a soul. A soul is eternal. It has no birthday. It doesn't age. So I'm saying when you start to look at beings that are so advanced that don't fall under time in the way we know time, they can travel back and forth because what you're calling time, going backwards and forward, it doesn't work like that. So if you can travel to the future, you can see what's going to happen, come back to now, and tell someone this is what's going to happen in the future based on the facts of the alignment and the fact that you've seen it already happen, you see. So when we look into our past, which we call our past, which we refer to as then, there's a then in the past, there's a now, and there's a then in the future. But they're all one and the same in existence. But if you have the ability, you can use many methods, such as remote viewing, such as astral project, such as traveling in a craft to break the time barrier, to go and time stops and you're looking back. You see, this is why they're using things like, the James Webb telescope, because they're trying to find out where did we come from. And in looking into space to see the origins of the universe, they can tell you and predict certain things looking forward, you see. So yeah, Dr. York is a being that is a time traveler, is a visitor from a much more advanced civilization, and we are evolving, going in that direction. So let me just land with this point to answer your question. If you look at technology, right? Because technology is one of those things that you're using it now. If we use, look at the iPhones, right? You're using it now, but you can remember, if you've been around a long time, where this evolved from. But you can also equally say, if we have this now, based on where it has evolved from, when, mobile phones used to carry a big battery with it and so forth, right? You can say, in 10 years, it's evolved to this. What will this be in 10 years from now? Now, you might say, I don't know, but we could actually just dissect that right now and say, okay, would we still need to carry it around? Would we still need to charge it up? Would it be this big and this heavy? Would it be translucent so you can see through it? There are so many things you can say. If we improve this in the future, this is gonna be primitive, right? So I'm just saying that to say that technology is one of those things that you can use to say, okay, this is what the future holds. And those that are working on it, they have prototypes. They have versions of these phones that are not yet released to the public that are doing these things that I'm telling you. Now, when we reach that time, in 10 years' time, they've done all the research and is now available to everyone. Because when something comes out, it's normally used by the people, like the military or the scientists, and then when they've moved on to like 6 generations deeper, they make it available to the average person. So we're saying like it's already there, but you don't know it's there because you haven't caught up. Now, when they release it, then everyone's going to be using that instead of this. But by that time, there are levels ahead that they're moving to. So as a species, we can look back of where we came from. Did we used to have cars? How did we evolve from transportation? And you see that when you study the evolution of species on the planet, there was a time where it sped up. And it's like in the last 100 years, the amount of technology you've got compared to going back the previous 100 years, it's evident that you're being assisted by much more intelligent beings that have evolved past what you're doing now. So they're coming back and saying, do you know that you lot can't cure cancer, but we already have the cure? Do you know that you lot can't travel intergalactically, but we already did that because we were where you are today at one point. We've evolved so far that now we can come back to where you are. Now, when we reach that point where we're able to come back and tell the primitive beings that are evolving behind us, they're going to look at us like, wow, you're gods. That's what happened. Extraterrestrials came here. The people you're talking about in the Bible, your angels, your prophets, and all of these guys, they're just angels or extraterrestrials that came and were teaching and trying to guide us, and people made them into gods and deities. And we've got one amongst us now telling us, I'm from the future, I'm from a planet called Risk, right? It's in the galaxy called Ilion. We have the cure for this and that. This is the guidance, this is the information you need, this is who you are. You built the pyramids, you did. And a lot of people are just like, do you know what I'm
Stunned.
saying? Stunned, right? But they're trying to figure out and find out who they are. You see? Yeah.
So how do
Yeah.
so how do you distinguish between divine revelation and science fiction, or are they on the same frequency?
No, they're not. Because the word science fiction in itself is the problem. You can't have science and then have fiction. They're different. Like it's like one is factual and one is fictional. It's made up. So by putting the two together, this is what happens. People get confused, and the confusion causes your brain not to be able to like progress because it's like imagine you're asking someone for directions to go forward, and they give you a direction that you can go left or you can go right. It's like, well, how am I going to go forward? I can't go in both directions. So confusion comes in. And that's why, the scriptures say that, the devil, when you use that word, is going to make evil fair seeming, because the only way they keep you trapped is by the confusion and the chaos. So when you say divine revelation, something that is divine, it's going to make sense, it's going to reason out, you're going to feel it, you're going to resonate with it. And when it doesn't, you're unsure, you're in chaos. This is why they introduced the word belief and have faith, because to believe and have faith, it's like just accept anything I say without researching it, without checking it out, without scrutinizing it and putting me on the spot to tell me, how do you know for sure? Like, tell me how you know what you're telling me, right?
Yeah.
And in the case of Dr. York, he's going, I'm telling you this because I'm you from your future. I'm you from your past. As the Grand Hierophant Tahuti, I wrote these tablets back then, and I've come back, and I'm the one explaining and teaching you how to avoid being trapped here by this being and these other extraterrestrials that are adverse, and they want to utilize your energy and keep you trapped so you don't get, as you say, the divine revelations. But the thing is, it's already in your DNA, it's programmed within you. So when you receive it, it has a chemical reaction in your being where your DNA explodes. And it's just like that eureka moment that, like, wow, it makes sense. I'm going to go down that direction, because if I go down the direction you're telling me, it's not working for me, it's not making sense, you see. So divine revelation, the frequency, the energy resonates. And for those who can resonate with it, because you also have to be vibrating on that level to resonate with it and receive it, you see. So when you hear truth, you know truth. When you hear lies, you know lies. But they try to get you to be confused all the time by mixing lies with truth, because the bait is always the truth. So, like, what do I mean by that? When you go fishing, right, you see people put a little worm at the end of the fishing rod, and that's the bait. That's going to make that fish come closer, or whatever prey you're trying to catch. And if you didn't have that, the fish wouldn't come. So with the Bible, with science fiction, is they will give you enough truth to keep you interested. The Bible will tell you about Egypt and include Egypt in the book. That's the hook, because your DNA, your being resonates with Egypt, because it's you. Like, you remember it. It's in your DNA. And then you can actually go there, take a plane, go to Egypt, look at the pyramids, touch it, and see that it's real. So now you're reading a book that's got Egypt in it. That's the bait. It's got you. Then all the crap and the lies and all the other stuff comes in, where, like you were saying, they give you this cross fiction. Listen to cross fiction, the crocs fiction, the crucifixion. Fiction is not true. They're telling you like it's fictional, like science fiction. Science fiction will give you a movie like Star Wars, Star Trek, or whatever, and they are telling you about these beings that can travel through space and time and do warp speed and do all of these things. But then the distortion come in when is, who are these beings? And of course, they're all going to be Caucasians, or they're going to make up stuff. So now you think it's just a movie, it's just a story, it's fictional. When in reality, there is truth embedded in it, but it's just enough to keep you hooked, and then they take you off on a tangent, you see. So yeah, divine revelation, if that's a very good point you've actually made, because if it wasn't the truth, if Malachi was not the truth, and all the thousand books he's written with all the information from 1960s to now wasn't truth, how would it hold so many people worldwide? How would it be able to you know what I mean, resonate. And that, why is he able to be the one to translate all the scriptures, all the books? Who gives him that power where no one else on the planet has been able to do that? No organization, Nation Islam, whoever, when you look at the books they follow and what is the moral guideline or principle that they're utilizing, it's going to end up like with Arabs. And then you're like, but Arabs were not here first. The Arabs have a part to play in the slave trade or the slave kidnapping. You know, then you look at the Bible, you're like, okay, who wrote this? Where's this coming from? It ends up back with King James, ends up back with Europeans who also have a part in the kidnapping of African people. So the more you look at, you know, you're like, okay, what makes Dr. York so great, so different? Why is he able to? So he's obviously got divine, as you put it, you know, yeah, guidance.
So
Yeah.
so so then my question would be, when Dr. York said that he came from different planets and dimensions, how can you tell if he being intergalactic or just being, cuckoo,
Yeah, good question. The question is, what is cuckoo? That's what you're going to have to define because there are people that are telling you things that don't make sense and people accept it. Are they crazy? Like I said, we can go from the cover of the books that okay, the reason we use the religion is because when you try to find out who's the most smartest, intelligent being, like people will take you to these books and say God Allah is. But then if you outsmart God and Allah, then he can't be that intelligent. So that doesn't make sense, right? So the people that are writing and telling you that, you know, a woman had a baby without a man, that there are unicorns, that there's this place called hell, there's a place called heaven. Hell is where you get tortured and, you know, burnt forever. All the things that you can read in any of these books, if they're not crazy or like you said cuckoo, then you know they tell you that there was a snake that can speak, that God took dust of the ground and made a man, and that woman comes from the rib of a, all of these things that you can pick any story. Noah, you can pick, he took, you know, two of every animal from around the planet to put on a boat. Every story you read in the Bible, you can literally go, these people are mentally, you know, they've got
yeah,
some issues.
especially when they talking about the Nephilims. That's
Right.
what I'm like, oh man.
Right. So if you can accept all of that, and then someone comes and gives you a version that makes more sense, and like you say, test the spirit, test the person. Like they, you know, they've actually done psychological tests, like because obviously when he was incarcerated, they were like trying to say, oh, because you know you have to have an evaluation, right, to see. Because when people commit crime, they will be like, oh, you know, the excuse is, you know, someone gets a gun and goes to a school or whatever, and you know, shoot up and alive people. They're like, oh, he had mental problems. There's some psychological problems that this is what they use to say to get a lenient sentence or whatever. So they will do an evaluation on you, and he aced every exam, every test that they put to him to see whether he was of sound mind. And you only have to read the books and the fact that why is it that from 1960 in the 60s till now, everything he has ever said that was going to happen in the future has come to pass. And you can like, because he's an author, right? So he has documented it in books. So no one can dispute that he said this at the time when this wasn't true. Like let's take extraterrestrial UFOs, whatever, right? He was talking about this before today, and today it's been proven, and many people now are seeing crafts talking about UFOs. Even governments are now doing disclosure and talking about unidentified flying objects, IFOs, UFOs, and now they're calling it on a, what they call it, aerial phenomenon,
That was
UAP,
that was right, aerial
right?
phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. So all of these things he said before. There's nothing you can go back to and read in a book he put out in the 70s, 80s, 90s with information about what was going to happen in the future that you're seeing today. So much so that you know the Leviathan books, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, he put the picture of the person that people are calling Donald Trump now today on the cover. Now, how was he able to know that and put his picture on the? And when you read it and what he's talking about and how he's explaining what's going to happen, it's happening now. So if he's crazy, I'm amongst, like he said on one recording, like when he was talking about Shambhala and Agatha and talking about the cities in the world and talking about extraterrestrials, people are like, yeah, he's crazy. And he's like, I don't care if you lot think I'm crazy. One day you're gonna realize that I'm telling you the truth. And Lord and behold, today so many people are talking about it, right?
I have
Documented.
to agree. I have to agree. A lot of
Yeah,
his revelations, not I won't say all of them, but a lot of them did came into fruition. And I see a lot of stuff that he was saying coming to light nowadays. But back in the days, especially when I was dealing with like starting and stuff, a lot of stuff was like brushed off. Until
right.
now, today, it's like, okay, now we talking about it. You know what I'm saying? Now we getting
Yeah.
into it. So
And even like you say, like for example, you'd have say the Rastafarians or even you know the Nation of Islam. They spoke obviously the Honorable Elijah Muhammad touched on what he called the mother plane, right? Even the Book of Revelations, they talk about the Crystal City, the Ezekiel will in the Old Testament, Daniel saw visions. There's so many references that the cloud the children of Israelites were following that was stopping the star that when the so-called birth of Jesus, the wise men followed. Like when you look at it in today with the knowledge you have, right? Clouds don't move and stop and have lights, and stars don't do the same. So these were crafts. Ezekiel's will was a craft. The crystal city is described in detail. But what I'm saying is back then most people would be like they didn't touch on the extraterrestrial stuff because back then you were really like looked at as you're cuckoo, like you're crazy. What, UFOs, aliens, flying crafts, and they didn't want you to touch on that. But now everyone is tying in now. Even the nation like claiming it, like, oh yeah, man, we spoke about the mother plane, but you didn't go into the details and explain what it is, where it comes from, who's on it, etc., etc. Like you read the holy tablets, Dr. York went into detail. Every subject, Yakub's story, they spoke about that, but they didn't go into the detail. They didn't tell you how these beings from Pleiades and the beings from Arcturus and Aldebaran and the Draconians and the reptilians, nobody was touching that. I mean, the few people that were touching it were people like David Icke, Zachariah Sitchin was talking about it a little bit, talking about the Anunnaki. Today, everybody's talking about the Anunnaki. Go back and read Dr. York's books. He was explaining Anunnaki better than anybody else. So we know he's not crazy. And if he said on the recording, what I was trying to say that,
in fact,
people think I'm crazy. I'm amongst, I'm in good company. And I would rather be in Dr. York's company and be labeled crazy than to follow anyone else out there. But go ahead.
yeah, for me, it was that it was the reptilian because I remember Dr. York was talking about the reptilian, and I was like, okay, that's kind of off the wall. Then I
Mm.
see what's his name? Not this Natural Geographic's talking about reptilians, and I was like, oh,
Yeah. I mean, if you watch Ancient Aliens now and Discovery Channel and all these channels, I guarantee you, everything they speak about, you can go back and see Dr. York said it first in a book years ago. So they're making movies now from his literature, but they won't admit it, of course. Gaia, the channel, you look at that, the stuff they talk about, literally, they're trying to break down Egypt and break down stuff that it's our science, it's our stuff. But they don't
right.
give the source or give credit because they want to profit off of it, and that's what people do. A lot of people are doing it now for profit and for money, but he was
Yeah.
doing it back then and giving it freely.
Even that movie Alien Predators it was just crazy. But let me ask you this:
Yeah,
Dr. York taught that we were originally ambiguous beings. Does that mean my ancestors has gills, then developed some type of good skincare routine that made us
yeah,
like what we are today?
yeah. I mean, even when we were talking about extraterrestrial, we always talk about it as if we're not them. We are them. We just on a different evolutionary scale. So we're evolving, and if you go back, we came from the stars, by their DNA and their genetics. They seeded this planet, and they did that by putting the living cells into the dolphin, and the dolphin came here and seeded the waters and germinated, and then we evolved from the water. So we had civilizations, still do to this day, in the deepest part of the water. People call this the planet Earth, but there's more water than there is Earth, and the deepness of the seas is unexplored. So there are beings still underwater, sirens, like what people call mermaids and mermen. Some of these things became included in the Bible and these books, because that's why I said they'll talk about all these creatures, but they don't tell you how they came about. So to answer your question, we evolved from the waters, and we are still in water. The air you're breathing is water. It's just a different density of water, right? You need to drink water. I was just drinking water to hydrate yourself. You have a bath or a shower every day. People find it romantic to go to the sea and be around the beach. Why do we have this obsession with water, right? And it's because we're in an aquarium. We are we're actually beings from the water. You go into the most ancient cultures, they will all tell you. The Dogons in Mali tell you that they came from the water. You go to Enki, and Enki was it was a reptilian being partly, and he, because his mother was, Id, right, and he built underwater cities, and so when you go to ancient Egypt, you talk about the snakes and the frogs and how we evolved from the waters and to become the Enneads and the Ogdoads and the Enneads, and then so we are those extraterrestrial beings because we're not originally from here, and we did evolve from the waters and then came onto land, and then we over time, because there were different incidents that made this happen, like tsunamis, where beings were thrown onto land. Some were thrown so far away they couldn't get back into the water. Some were close enough, they went back in the water. Some had to evolve. Some were on trees, and so whatever environment you find yourself, you adapt and you evolve to that environment. So yes, we are water beings, and like, if we didn't cream ourselves and bathe, we will get ashy and we're going to result back. So we have different parts of us. So we have the reptilian part, right? Because again, when you say reptilian, you're talking about a being that's in water. Then those that came onto land became amphibious beings that could live in the water and on land. And then you have those that only stayed on the land. So, like you say, we have parts of our body like the tonsils, the appendix. These are parts of our body that we utilized when we were in the water. And now, when you have a problem with your appendix, doctors or practitioners don't a lot of the time know what it is. They just say it's erupted and they just remove it. Your tonsils is the same because you could breathe underwater. As a child in the womb of your mother, you're in water. You're in water for 9 months. So when you look at the history, look at the evidence, it goes back to, beings evolved. Even the scientific world will tell you, before you get to like humanoid beings, you have to go back to the living cells. The cell, because this is what I'm saying about when you study, cells will start off like single cells, or like the algae, that the amoebas that evolved into the single cells, and then it depends how far back you want to go. So most of the times we only go back to the point where you're dealing with like what they call like ape man and all of that, right? So anthropologists will go to like, okay, the Homo habilis, the Homo naledi being the African, then they will say, the Denisovan, the Homo florensis being the Asian, and then the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon being the Caucasian. But that's when you're dealing with when we've evolved to that point. But when you go back way, 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 way before this planet was inhabited by humanoid, you had other types of beings that were here. They told you about the dinosaurs, and they find the skeletons and all these things. So there's the what they call history, which is just his story, only goes back so far. It's very limited. It only goes back like 6,000 years, and then they tell you about Darwin and the Big Bang, which only deals with the Big Bang and dealing with one universe. But today they're telling you there's more than one universe. That they use movies are being made now, like Doctor Strange, the multiverse. You talk about Ant-Man dealing with the multiverse, and then now with the technology I mentioned before, the James Webb Telescope dealing with the birth of the universe and going beyond that. You see, so they're like omniverse. So look at the time period you're dealing with when you're talking about the birth of the universe to where we are today, and then look at how life forms evolved and how they came to be. And you will see that, yeah, it's from the waters, and the first thing they look for when they're trying to go to any planet to live is what? Water. They say where there's water, there's life. It might be bacteria, it might be life forms that you're not looking at as like significant because they're not in the same form that you are in. So you would kind of look at it, oh, it's only tiny microscopic life forms, but that's how we started, so hey.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Mm.
Definitely, because especially as a Nuwabian, let's say in the future they find out there's another planets, and these people that live in other planets look like the creatures that Dr. York was talking about.
Mm.
They be like, "Well, I told you so. I told you so."
They already have. This is the thing about it. Like if you look at what is documented, remember, Caucasians, Europeans are also being abducted and given their accounts of the beings that they've been abducted by. They're drawing, like you can get artist impression, right? You can get people that, like for example, when there's a crime and they're trying to get an artist impression of the person, they will sit down with an artist and the person will describe and the artist will draw this person, and then they would say, is this the person? Does this look like the person? They'll be like, yes. Then they circulate that picture and they will find the person eventually, take DNA, whatever, whatever. Right? I'm saying that to say that many types. Have you heard of the Body Snatchers by
No.
Susan Reed? Okay, so there's a book, and I think there's probably a movie as well to go along with it called The Body Snatchers. And Susan Reed, the author, she explains in great detail her encounters with different beings. You have people like David Icke and other people that have spoken about, you got beings on the planet right now that shapeshift, that are in prominent positions. You see all over the internet, and that this is why they had to introduce AI, because what AI is able to do now is just even more further distort reality and truth. Because what happened is that years ago, when you would talk about these things, if you saw it, it will be hidden or covered, and no one wants to talk about it. And you say that, I saw a being that was able to shapeshift. Like these beings in certain prominent positions on the planet are reptilians that can shapeshift and do certain things. People will dispute it. But then there are people who are amongst those parties or those gatherings that they see this. Then you start to have whistleblowers and people that are leaking information, people that worked in projects, like Bob Lazar, people that were working in Area 51 and all this kind of thing. So they're people who were involved in the conspiracies, like, oh, we didn't go to the moon. Oh, it was a staged. And on their dying bed, they start to confess. So a lot of truth is starting to come out about different types of extraterrestrials or beings that have been here for millions of years that are able to camouflage themselves and live amongst humans. Some live in the caverns, some live in the seas, some are in crafts. They have the technology to be able to cloak themselves with the clouds. Dr. York was speaking about this in Mystery Clouds. Are there UFOs amongst you? Many books he was telling us, like, some clouds, study the stars. Most people don't take the time to study looking up, looking at the stars, looking at the clouds to see, why is that cloud over there like that? Why does it look like that? Why is it shaped like that? Why has it been there for that long? And when it moves, why did it, there's certain things you will see, many signs and wonders right in front of our faces, but many people have been distorting the information. So when I say AI, now you can watch things on social media that are, and AI is introduced to us by extraterrestrials who have an agenda, because as I said, as things have become more realistic and real, people are citing things, they have to cover it up. So that technology is able to distort it. So you'll see something on YouTube or social media or any of those platforms that is created or generated by AI to distort someone else who saw something that was very similar. Now you're like, oh, that's not real. It's the same way where they were using CGI before, right? When you look at like footage from like 9/11 and so on and so forth, then you have smart people, scientists who will study the footage and see whether or not would this happen. Like if you shot a gun in that direction, the trajectory of the bullet and where it will hit and maybe bounce off. And but there are people that they show you this in CSI and all these types of things, like forensic. You can study things and look at things from a scientific point of view and come to conclusions. So when you saw the orbs, right, the other day, there was a big thing about the orbs. What did they say? First, it was orbs. Everyone was reporting seeing orbs and they were doing this and moving in a particular way. What happens next? Drones are sent out to confuse and, distort everything. So now someone will see a drone and say, nah, that's not real. There's not orbs, it's a drone. Someone else sees an orb, it's real. But now the confusion is like, you don't know what to believe, who's telling the truth and who's telling you, lies. So that's the trick, to always distort things. I know, we've I don't mind. I'll go on as you're comfortable until
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got your questions. But
I had a question
yeah.
about the extraterrestrials. So like, did Dr. York say that he was did Dr. York say he was a reincarnated angel, prophet, an extraterrestrial? I'm sorry if I'm saying it
No,
wrong.
that's fine. Yeah, again,
It's not
like,
really you. It's not really my vocabulary
yeah,
per
yeah, I
se.
hear you.
And if
Um,
so, is he the is and
you
if
know,
so,
the funny thing about this extraterrestrial thing subject, you have to like break words down, as you know, with us in Wu-Sabat, right? Extra just means addition or in addition to. Terrestrial deals with the planet or the terrain, right? So scientifically, when you're saying extraterrestrial, you're saying something that's coming from outside the planet to the terrain of the planet, right? Celestial come in here. Or so when you break down the word, it's like anything that comes from outside here is an extraterrestrial. So Dr. York didn't introduce extraterrestrials. It's in the Bible because they tell you God is somewhere called heaven. And Jesus was in heaven and he came down here. The angels come from heaven down here and they go back. So when you ask the question, where is heaven? They will say up there. You say up there where? Even the language is like Samawati, Shaim, it's like, okay, Shamayim, what is up there? So we start to look up there. We look up there, we see stars. Then we see star constellations. Then you read in the Bible, it's mentioning the Pleiades, the Arcturus, Aldebaran, all these places, right? For those who are not familiar with the quotes, you can look at Job 9:9, Amos 5:8, Revelation 21. I mentioned the book of Daniel's, Ezekiel. So these beings are coming from outside here, doing things and going back up. In the case of Jesus, they say he's gone back and he's sitting on the right hand side of the Father. So these are all extraterrestrials. Now, when somebody else comes along, as bringing it to Dr. York, and he says, I'm not from here. Jesus even said, you're from beneath, I'm from above, right?
right?
Anu means the most high, who the highest. So when Dr. York comes along and says it, I'm from somewhere else. It's like, is he an extraterrestrial? We're all extraterrestrials because what are we composed of? The physical body,
Stardust.
right? No, but the physical
Uh,
body goes back to the ground, right? And then what happens to the real us, the essence that people call the spiritual or the soul? Where does that go? They tell you if you've made it and you've been a good person, you go to this place called heaven. And if you're bad, you're going to go to this place called hell. So there's an essence of us that continues, and they call this eternal life or life after death. So if you accept that, and then you accept that that essence of you comes from a being that's not from here, as in God, Allah, He blew into man and man became a living spirit, right? Or living soul. That means you're an extraterrestrial because you're not originally from here, you see. And so beings that come from somewhere else. Greys have been seen, Ramadians, the Ashtar Federation, even Hitler was talking about visitors that came to him, right? The blonde hair, blue eye beings. Every culture you go to talks about beings coming from the stars or from somewhere else down here. So why is it so strange when we as the original people talk about our ancestors coming from Orion and coming from Sirius, and they came here, built the pyramids, aligned the belt of Orion with the pyramids in Giza? Why is that? Why, and then they teach you everything and tell you that they don't come from here. So, yeah, he's just like us. It's just that you have to develop yourself, the real you, the real being, which is an extraterrestrial. So you're an extraterrestrial. You have to look at the DNA. And now they're telling you the RH, negative. If you start to look at the bloodlines of the beings that are running the planet, they all have that bloodline, and they try to maintain that bloodline within the control and of running the world. You start
Right,
look at
right.
the families that run the world, look at their blood types, look at what where they link up to. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
extraterrestrial thing is funny because it's like everyone's an extraterrestrial to a certain degree because of the makeup of your DNA, your spirit, your soul doesn't come from here, you see.
Right. So let me ask you this. It seems like Dr. York teachings include Egyptian, Islamic, Hebrew,
Hmm.
and somewhat UFO belief. If 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 Dr. York was a let's say Dr. York had a playlist, what would be Dr. York's greatest hits?
Right. Again, let me clarify that. What it is, when you're teaching someone, you walk them in stages, right? Just like a child will go to the kindergarten or nursery, and you teach them information based on what they're capable of comprehending at that age. As they grow and they get older, you introduce new things. So you don't teach a baby algebra and equations. You would use things they can play with, shapes, and then they're developing. But you're teaching them, but in a way that is comprehensible for their level. Then they move on to maybe primary school, then secondary school. Then you might start to teach them supreme mathematics. You start to teach equations and higher maths. Then you might go on to college. We say university, where you're now you're supposed to be taught about the universe. That's why it's called a university. But you don't learn about the universe. What they do, they teach you trade and skills that you can come out and work and be productive in their system to produce and be a consumer, right? But my point is, when Dr. York was teaching us, remember at the time he came was like want to teach us about Wu-Sabat and Wapu sciences of the universe and extraterrestrials and UFOs, and we're like, whoa, who's Abraham? How did Adam? We're asking questions on kindergarten or baby stages to him, because being an extraterrestrial that knows, he's like, wow, like they're stuck in these religious books. So he had to walk us through the school. So when he said, let me put away, because initially he was teaching us Egyptian and Kmetic sciences, and he was teaching us about our culture, right? Dealing with Sufism, dealing with ancient Yoruba traditions and stuff that was more cultural. But he put it away and he said, okay, let me answer your questions. I have to raise you in degrees. So people asked about Abraham, Moses, Jesus, the Bible, the Quran, and all of this stuff. So that's why we went through the schools, because you had to submerge you in it so that you actually lived it as if it was real, like you really believed it, until you got to a point where he said, you asked me the ultimate question, because we had asked so much questions about God and Abraham and Jesus and Allah and all, like we got to a point where we outgrew them when we asked the question, who is God, or who is this Allah? Like we want to know that person, that being now. So he was like, we removed the mask of God, and at that point you had to come to terms with that. The being you're searching and looking for is you. You're the God, you're the Allah, you're that being. And now it's like Me? Because the way they taught you about this being was like, he's so far away from you, unreachable. He's in a place called heaven. He sits on the throne. He sends all these prophets. He does all these things. He can click his hands and things just manifest and happen. And but when you get to ancient Egypt, these pharaohs were called gods, and they're doing all of this thing. They're doing alchemy, which is what they're calling miracles in religious dogma. They're building things and curing diseases and doing things that no one else is able to do. They like these are the Egyptian gods. Now you're the descendants or their children. So what do you think you're going to be? So he walked us through, you know, Islam, but during that time, he would still teach you the facts of it as well as what you're familiar with. Then when you graduated from that, he's like, cool, you've mastered that. Now let's move on. Then we'll learn about Christianity, life and times of Jesus, the whole, and we're learning the languages and the scriptures as we're doing this, right? So then we learn, then we walk backwards, and it was like, okay, Old Testament, we started to deal with that. Then, like, where did the Old Testament come from? Oh, these are copied from Anunnaki stories. We go into the Anunnaki, we study, Sumerian doctrine, we learn about Anu and his family, and Enki, Enlil, Nagal, Erishkigal, all about them, what they did, how did they come here. That then we're like, okay, then he takes us to what people are calling Egypt. So it's like walking backwards to the roots. And once we got to Egypt, he was like, that's you. You're those gods. Look at your nose, look at your lips, look at the drawing, look at the writings on the wall, look at the people. Because as we were walking, every religion he took us through, we were seen as, oh, they're not real. Christianity mainstream didn't accept us because we're teaching this foreign and weird stuff that, you know what I mean, like Mary wasn't a virgin, that Jesus is an extraterrestrial, that the things there's craft in it, like we're crazy. So when we got into Islam, they didn't accept us. Oh, you lot making up your own Islam, the Sunni Orthodox Sunni Muslims didn't accept us. So when we leave each one of these schools, the same people that were saying we are not real, they miss us because when we are there, we bring that energy. We do it in the most authentic way according to their own writings. So then we learn Arabic, we study the Quran, we learn the history of it. We know that the rightful successor should have been Ali, and then Abu Bakr and all these people came in and distorted it and took over. The desert Arabs are now controlling what you're calling even Egypt by the time we get to Egypt. So once we got to Egypt now, there's the same problem. You have all these dynasties, and everyone's claiming that they tie into this dynasty and that dynasty. And he's like, that's again a trick. It's called Pandora's box, right? When you open that, it's like again you have the Ramesses dynasty, the this dynasty, and then it's fighting. So he's like, look, I'm going to take you back to your stuff now, Wu-Sabat, back to you being the original people and beings on this planet before religion. This is your language, this is your culture. Everyone else borrowed from it to go off in the different branches and become what you're now given as a watered down version of the most authentic. So let me take you back to the most authentic. So yeah, we literally walk backwards to what people will say ancient Egypt, but before that, before it was even called Egypt, back to the
Okay.
roots of the planet, where
All right.
I
So
mean,
if
we're
it's
dealing with Africa or Afafre Ka. Go ahead.
no, 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 if you was, are you finished or you want to
No,
continue?
yeah, I'm saying like when you start to go backwards, it's how far do you want to go? Because we can go back for literally trillions of years, you see.
Okay.
So that's most people grab onto a part of that story, but don't connect the dots all the way back to the source.
Okay. If it's true that Dr. York taught that humans evolved from ambiguous beings and we were genetically altered by being from Orion, if the truth is in our DNA, why hasn't a single credible, genetic or not
Genesis.
geneticist or evolutionary biologist confirmed anything close to this?
Right, they have. But again, who are you talking about? Because who is the person, the geneticist or the people that you're looking up to tell you this information. Because remember, what I explained is that if they were not there, right? This is one of the most famous quotes that he used to say, right? Don't believe me, check it out, right? And if you watch our documentary, we quote him saying that because it's back to front to expect anyone that doesn't have the information to give you the information, for one, right? So when you're saying go and check it out, you're only going to check it out based on the information that's available. So people will Google something. It's funny, it's like today, right? In our time period, if you tell somebody something, we call them the Google generation. If they search in Google and it comes up, then they will accept it. Like, this is gospel. But Google is also saturated with all kinds of information, fake, real, true, and all sorts. So you still have to be able to discern when you receive information from whoever, whatever source, and say which one's credible and which one is not, right? So Dr. York used to say there's going to come a time where I'm going to have to take you beyond this, what you call in planet and the information contained here, because your story does not start on the planet. It starts from beyond the planet. This is where the whole UFO extraterrestrial things comes in. And he's telling you, the first page on the Holy Tablets is telling you that I'm going to take you to time periods beyond your ability to comprehend at this time. And he goes into talking about the beings from the different constellations and so forth. So he said, there will come a time where I'm going to give you, listen to this, out formation, not information.
Out
Because
from
information is contained within the confines of the planet, inside the planet, information, insane, right? Everything that has the word in is dealing with being inside the planet. Out formation, right? People say, oh, you're making up words. Well, you made up the word information. So if there's an in and there's a word called out, then you put two words together, in and formation, to get information. So I can put two words together, out and formation, to get out formation and break it down. Out formation isn't, it becomes information when it gets into the planet, but it's coming from outside in. You're now going to be taught and taken to a time period and a stage of your evolution before you had bodies, right? And that's where, if you read like the Quran and all these books, they're talking about when you're dealing with the heaven, they say the heavenly host. They're now taking you outside the planet and saying there's a place, there's a being that is the Most High, or God, or Allah, that sits on a throne. He has a heavenly host. They refer to them as angels. And then there are other people. So where is this place? Who are these people? This is outside of the planet. So now, Dr. York is telling you, I'm going to give you information. You're not going to be able to go and check it out from the inside information, people that are trapped within people, places, and things.
Yep.
So now we're moving to that stage. This is why he's giving you knowledge on things that the scientists have to wait for him. And then when they discover it, they put it out and publicize it. So he was talking about three parents' birth, talking about tri-solar systems, right? That's, places with planets where you have three suns. This is what he was explaining and describing risk. And now they've discovered and found this. So what I'm saying is he's now able to give you and keep going, but you have to be raised to a point where you're able to assimilate this information, or assimilate out formation into information inside your head. But he already explained that what you're calling the mind, it's not in you, it's outside of you, right? You're tapping into something called a mental reservoir, which, if you have the ability and the resonance to tap into those vibrations and those frequencies, you will pull that. And people tell you that now, like they can use their pineal gland, open their third eye. They can travel into interdimensionally. They basically now dealing with esoteric information. So when we were going through the schools, he would always teach us the scientists, the scientific as well as the spiritual side. So in most religions, they will have a spiritual order, right? So in Islam, they will have the Sufi. In Christianity, the beings that were serious, that were about learning about their inner being, the real being, like Jesus and Yahshua and these guys, they were a part of an order called the Essenes order, right? Every culture you go to, there's a spiritual aspect. In Egypt, this was the mystery schools where you would be taught as a student of Tahuti or these great beings like Zosa or Zauza or Imhotep. And these beings were beings that have elevated to such a high level and they're very studious, right? That they will be taught information or affirmation that is higher than, it's just like I said, like
True.
at university, you're going to learn higher advanced information that you will do in nursery, So yeah, so that's where
But
we're at now, where you
but my
don't,
question. Okay.
sorry, let me just finish. You can verify what Dr. York teaches to a certain point, and the rest of it goes beyond the physical, where you're now dealing with your soul, your spiritual being that is able to tap into and discern that as that being, not because you've got different levels to your being, as I was saying before. You've got physical people, a lot of people just deal with the physical things, like things they can touch, that they can prove, and then you got your spiritual, you got your mental, you got your soul being. So the beings that are evolving and growing and knowing and recognizing the real inner being, they can
Right.
relate on that level and tap into that source, and then to them they can. It's beyond. It's more like I say. I'll say feel the higher senses, right? So telepathy, intuition, psychometry, clairvoyance. These are the types of senses you're going to start, and that ties into what you were saying about the barothry gland and how you were maimed or like be advanced beings messed with you genetically.
Mm. Okay, then my question is then is that in the holy tablets, Dr.
Hmm.
York teaches that the planet Riz orbits a triple sun system, and
Hmm.
that he reincarnated here to bring us divine knowledge. If that's true, how do we reconcile with the basic astrophysics of that? Wouldn't life in a triple sun system be nearly impossible due to its
No, because
unstable?
when you study in the holy tablets and other scrolls, he's got a small scroll called Ilion Risk that talks about where he's from. And before I answer that question, one thing is the consistency. Like when you tell somebody about something that they've never heard before, and you write hundreds and hundreds of books, and every time you speak about that same subject, it's exactly the same for over 50 years. There is a consistency that if somebody was making something up or telling a lie, more than likely the different versions you tell the story, it will change, but it has been consistent from day one. Now, as I said to you, they have already discovered tri-solar systems now. When you're saying a solar system, solar relating to the stars or the sun, right? So if you look at a diagram of risk, it's got this is where the pyramid, if you look at the pyramids on the planet, that's the science, because you look at one, two, three, that's the three suns, right? And it relates to the what people call the motion of the sun, the rising, the zenith or the middle point, and then the setting. And then it supposedly goes into the underworld. This is where the Anunnaki will go into the underworld and then come back out. So there are things that are broken down in science that get interpreted into mythology or interpretations, like you were saying with the atom and atom, right? So you got the science, which would be the atom, but then you got the realness of the people, which would be atom, and then that science, as you're saying now, you're saying astrophysicists. Now, if you look at that, in the middle is where the planet risk is, and the way it travels is like it would go like, imagine just like around the three suns. So its rotation, it goes around the three suns, and that's one orbit, right? The same way in our solar system, we have one predominant sun, right? That is 93 million miles away. it fluctuates between 91 and 93 millions away, depending on the position of our planet, right? Because it has an elliptical orbit. So when it's at the two ends where it's furthest away from the sun, it's going to be 93 million miles away. When it's at these two sides, where it's closer, it's 91 million miles. So it fluctuates, right? And that came about 93 billion years ago. And that's how our planet works. It goes around the sun. And that's the trajectory that it's actually a craft traveling, right? Now, when you look into the cosmos, this is what I'm saying. There's levels of information when you start to study the stars and study how stars come about, how they're born, how they live, how they die. It's a whole different science, right? And then you start to look at clusters. You start to look at this is where you get the pictorial diagrams of the different constellations. Like we are very familiar with the Orion because that's our ancestors and where they come from, the Sirius. But you can look at Aldebaran, you can look at Pleiades. They all have stars that form the diagram that they give you the pictorial form so you can recognize them when you look in the night sky. But you can get applications now on your phone that will literally detect and show you where they are. So to go back to your question, you're dealing with a being that is telling you about places and things outside of what the scientists, astrophysicists, and people know. And they're trying to catch up, you see? So eventually they will get that information, but it takes time, just like how I was explaining about technology. It's taken time with extraterrestrials coming and giving you parts of the formulas to do things that you couldn't do before. So yeah, you have to watch the space and keep watching what like now he's telling us things just as he's been doing from the 60s that are yet to come or to happen. See, so we're in a position where those of us who've been walking with him all along, we've seen everything he said come to pass. We're here now, and he's telling us about things that are going to happen, are coming, and we see it happening every day as we move to that time period. Then we see the scientists, the Discovery Channels, and Ancient Aliens, and all these other guys that are teaching what we knew. Like we're like, man, that's in the Holy Tablets from the 60s, 70s. I'm not well, the Holy Tablets was in the 90s, but I'm saying when we hear people talking about Anunnaki and all this stuff, we're like, that's the school we went from years ago. We've passed that school. So the purpose was so that we, as the new student teachers of this day and time, are able to speak to anyone because we can relate to those schools they're in. We can relate to a Christian because we walked through that school. We can relate to a Muslim. We can relate to a Hebrew. We can relate to a scientist. We can relate to archaeologists. We can relate to everyone because we didn't just study one thing. We studied all of it. And that's why you have a well-rounded kind of like knowledge of things to the point where we share what we learn and then you have to go and see whether the scientists they're listening and waiting to hear what he has to say and then they say it. But yeah, I hope that
Boy,
answered the question.
yeah, it definitely did. I ain't thought it was gonna get that deep, but man, did it get deep?
Yeah, that's why I say when we have these one-to-ones, it's
Right.
it's based on the person, like the question they come with. That's where we're gonna meet them at. If you were here and one of those people that was just asking me about biblical stories and what happened, I could walk you through it because we've done it cover to cover, like breaking down every word from the first cover of the book. You see, so depending on the person, the conversations are interesting and will move to different levels based on what we get asked. You see, so sometimes imagine. Sometimes I'm like I think to myself how Dr. York must feel when we are, even though we've studied with him, when we're asking him questions that's on some low level, like he's like, oh man, like they ain't raised to the level I wanna, because he's talking about. If you go and listen to there's a recording called not the seed, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, there's a recording where he's saying he wants to start teaching us things more advanced, like teleportation and you know, things where we can teleport and do certain things, but we have to, like when he was trying to teach us about Wu-Sabat and we were asking questions about religion, like we have to raise our mentality and our vibration and learning our language and things like that is where, because imagine, right? Imagine you know our language fluently and he's teaching you things in our language that no one else can tap into. How are you going to go and check that out unless you speak the language? And
True.
this is where we're going with, like, with our language, like, because you can hear two Asian people on the bus or wherever you are, they speaking their language and talking, and you don't have a clue what they're saying, and they may be speaking about plotting to do something to you, and you're sitting right next to them, and you have no clue what they're saying. It's the
True.
same with it, you know. We now have our culture and our language, and we have to, and that helps our brain as well to elevate to a level that we can receive more from the master.
So I mean, okay, I understand that. Um, Dr. York, uh, Dr. York came from the planet Riz,
Oh,
taught
'cause let me clarify something because sometimes people do get spooked out. Like
for sure.
Dr. York is not Yanun, right?
Mhm.
Yanun is the spiritual master or the being within the physical being of Dr. York. So they're separate entities, just like you have a soul, right?
Uh-huh.
Your soul being is not you, even though it's within you. It's separate from your physical body. You just don't know that being yet in terms of what's its name from where it was originated. And that's like saying, okay, you're when you get to know, like say you were able to be in front of your parents, your etheric parents. I know it might sound crazy to some people, right? But like your physical composition was born off of a male and a female on this planet because you need to be in the form of the elements and the environment you're in to be able to traverse and have locomotion and things like that. So you need this skin suit. But the real you comes from somewhere else and it came down here, right? And where it came from, it has parents and you have a name. So that's like saying your name, your real name, not the ones your physical parents gave you. Let's say your physical parents gave you a name like John, but that's not your real name because those tones are from a language that's not your language, right? But in the etheric realm, your parents called you Saken, and that's your name, or Yanun. Yanun is the being that guides Malachi's pen. Yanun is the being that is the incarnation that has incarnated over and over again in different time periods, known by different names, such as Tahuti, where it becomes Thoth in the Greek. But that being is the being within Malachi. So it's important for people to differentiate the two. That's why Malachi says, look, of my own, I could not do the works that you know I'm bestowing the whole world and the planet with. I was selected to be that entity, that guide, and he was actually taken and shown and taught this. Right? If you read the book called, actual fact called Akasha Records, he explains how he goes to these galactical meetings and they sat him down, projected screens and explained who he is and where he's from. Like you said, he was shown, you see that planet Risk over there? That's where you come from. That's where your people come from. And da 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 da. And your name is Yanun, and you've been given an assignment. You know, you're gonna go to the planet and you're gonna help save people. Da 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 da. So yeah, I just want to make that because people get this thing where they try to say, "Oh, he's possessed by all these beings," because they don't understand or take the time to learn. It's not a possession. It's like they're one and the same. Just like when your physical body goes to the ground, the real being of you carries on to a different existence. You see, so yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. But go ahead, don't
Oh
forget
yeah,
your
yeah. Thank you.
question.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the clarification, because like you know, that probably just something I just brushed, like kind of like went over the surface, and you kind of like went in deep into it. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate your clarification on that. But but my question was that he taught like Egypt science, practiced Islamic law, preached Hebrew roots, wrote in Sumerian symbols, and still had time to record music albums. And I was
Mm.
just like, excuse my French, but I was like, how in the hell he had time for all this? And like,
Yeah.
do you have like a master class on time management?
We actually do. And another thing I should mention now that you've touched on it, as students, right? As student teachers, well, as students, first of all, we explain many times that the culture has different aspects where there are different orders where you get taught higher level information, right? Not everything you hear us teach in public. What we teach in public is for everyone and it's for those who will, like we say, graduate from one level to the next. So you may be like in religion or Egyptology or whatever you're studying at the moment, and you're like, you come to Wu-Sabat, it's like cool. We then take it to a kind of a different level. But then when you decide that you want to learn more, want to go into the deepness of your real being or who you really are, then as you come into the community, you have the options to go into these different orders, right? Where you're then taught information that is not publicly available. It's only to those people in those orders. So we have a brotherhood, we have a sisterhood, we have elders, we have a young student or young disciples, or what we call the madrusu, right? Young student association, where you're groomed and taught things on a higher level. So things like time management is something that, not saying, I mean, everybody teaches some level of time management, right? But every subject has different levels to it. So I'm saying is for people that are serious, just like I was saying in the Egyptian mystery school, there were those students who would sit amongst, at the feet of these great teachers, and they will impart certain information. This is why everybody went to Egypt to learn. It was about the schools. Like you were learning alchemy, you were learning, the things that Jesus so-called miracles in the Bible, walking on water, transforming, multiple bread and fish to feed the masses. All this is just alchemy, right? This is just science, levitation, all of these things, right? So I'm saying, yes, there is higher information where men can be groomed and taught some of these secrets, right? So, but yeah, in the general sense of time management, everyone has. See, another thing people say they have 24 hours in a day, but that when you look into that, it doesn't make sense. But you've been taught this from the beginning, like you just assume, oh, 24 hours in a day. Then you say, okay, if there are 24 hours in a day, which part is day and which part is what they call night? Because if there are 24 hours in a day, because the day denotes the aspect that you call the time when the sun is visible and you're not sleeping. So that's 12 hours. So there are actually 12 hours in a day, not 24 hours in a day. There are 12 hours in a day and 12 hours in what they call night. But we also know there's no such thing as called night, because when you break down the word, it's saying the sun has set, but we know the sun doesn't set because it's just a shadow state where the planet is in the shadow. Because whilst you're in what you're calling night or the shadow aspect, if you go to the other part of the planet on the other side, people are in what they're calling day. So you're on the same planet, but on one side of the planet, like you can literally get on a plane and travel from the UK to America, and I've done it many times where you come from what they call night into day. So I traveled in the in the night and I arrived in the day. So yeah, I'm just saying that to say that you have to first of all realize you have 12 hours in the day and 12 hours in what you call night, and your body has a rhythm. This is where it ties into the soul and so forth. You have a rhythm, you have a vibration where things work according to the motion and nature. So there's a time when you should eat, a time when you should sleep, and a time when you're doing other things. So your circadian rhythm, because the planet is alive, it has a vibration, it's in tune with other planets, it's in tune with the solar system, and it's in tune with the galaxy is in tune with the universe is in tune with other universe. So there are certain things that move and have been designed that way. If you're out of whack or out of time with it, then you're off time, you're off key. So going back to the music as well, music has a science. It's, you know, beats and rest, because it's all about pulsation, you know, in and out, breathing in and out, up and down. The wave goes up and down. Everything has a pulsation. So when you're dealing with time, if you look at the 24 hours, it's broken down. Let's say you break that down into 3 8 hours slots, right? So from 12 to 8 will be one section. And then if you count in again from that 8 to 4 a.m., that's another 8 hours. And then from that 4 a.m. back to the 12, right? Then it's a cycle, right? So you go from 12, what they would call midday, to 12, where they call out the night. And then so you have that 24 hours. So you have to break down your time. So for example, the 3 8 hours slots that I gave you would be like a time for taking things into your body. So you shouldn't really eat before 12, right? Because that before that time you're fasting. So from 12 to 8 is when you should be eating, right? And then from that 8, that's why most people that teach you about nutrition and diets and stuff like that, they say don't eat after 8, or some will say 9 o'clock. But from 9 going the other way is digestion. You allow because your body works with these rhythms like assimilation, digestion, elimination. What happens is if you do everything off whack, where when you're supposed to be sleeping, you're awake. When you're supposed to be digesting your food, you're eating. And when you're supposed to be eliminate, so you're already thrown off, right? And so you have to be in tune and in balance with nature and how it works. Then you're gonna be like more in sync, because if you're not, then your vibration is off. And remember what I was saying, everything is vibrating. So for one person, if they're in tune and moving with the right kind of motion, they don't feel the same way as if you're moving really fast and you're really quickly and you're eating fast food and you're not resting and you're not sleeping and you're agitated. You're more kind of like, it's going to seem like time is moving faster for you. So when you go to places where people are chilled out, where people are relaxed, like where the sun is out, where people are moving according to nature, it literally feels like time has stopped. Then you come back into the West or go into the places where everyone's just up and rushing, and like they call it the rat race. So yeah, so there are sciences to how you manage your time and what you're supposed to do that will make you be in tune. It's like music. When you're playing music, it's a group of people that are in tune. And like I said, you got the tones of vibrations and frequencies. And if somebody plays something that is off key, they'll say, oh, that's a bum note. So you pick it up. It's like that. It's not resonating. It's off. Like, or someone's playing in time. Someone else is playing badum 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 badum. They're off time. It's not going to be in harmony. You see. So harmony creates that peace, that level of you're going to do more because you're concentrating. You see, concentration is a big part of, like, someone can take 10 hours to do the same task another person can take an hour to do, because the person that takes an hour, they're concentrating, they're focused, they're not distracted by the different things that would distract you, so you would get it done. So if you read the mind book, Dr. York will tell you, like, you're trying to do dishes, but you think that by listening to music or doing something else is going to help you do the dishes quicker. It will actually going to take you longer, because the way your mind works is it can do one thing at a time efficiently and more productively than you thinking you're doing 10 things at the same time. But what you're doing is you're sharing the time between those things. So this is how processors and computers, people say they're multi-processors or multitasking. And now, yes, they've moved to a level of computing where you're dealing with quantum, computers, which is a slightly different thing. But the processor, all it was doing is like it's doing the things really quickly, but it's oscillating between the different actions. So to the person, they will think, oh, it's multitasking, but it's not. It's actually just spreading and dividing the time between the multiple tasks.
Mhm.
Whereas if you just focus on one task, complete it, this is all part of how you control your mind. Because if you monitor yourself, right? This is, I know I'm going on a little bit, but you're asking
Hey,
some
fine, go ahead. Go ahead.
great questions. But if you monitor yourself when you get up, right? You might get up and be like, imagine you're rushing. You might go into the bathroom, trying to get your clothes, trying to get ready. You might pick up, the lotion to cream yourself, but then you put the lotion down, and then you might be looking at your phone. What you're doing is you're not realizing that you're not focusing on one thing at the same time. So you're not going, okay, forget everything else. I'm gonna cream myself and lotion myself. You do that, then you don't have one socks on, and then you're running around to go and do something. So that's all chaotic. So all I'm trying to say to you is that when you are in order, things are in order, and it's a lot easier. So I remember watching the movie The Fly, and it made me laugh because when you're different and you do things in a different way to what people are used to, people label you like crazy. And the reason I mentioned that movie is because throughout the movie, the guy wore the same suit, and the girl that he was with was like, don't you ever change your clothes? Don't you have any other clothes?" And there was a scene where he opened his wardrobe and he was getting changed for the next day or whatever. And when he opened the wardrobe, he had like the same exact suits, but he had many of them, right? Now, every day someone sees him, they think he's wearing the same suit, but it's just that he knew that if I have 10 suits, different colors, different designs, I'm going to be like, oh, shall I wear this one or shall I wear that one? It takes you time to decide on what to wear, and something as simple as that. But if you multiply that over a period of time, the amount of time you're losing by just trying to decide what to wear. So it was easy for him. He just picked the same suit every time. So she was like, "Oh, I see." And I find that I'm like that sometimes because when you see me, I'm always wearing the same. Because it's your mind is not getting distracted by too many choices. And now when you look at that and then you multiply that by, oh, I got 10 cars, I got 10 shoes, I got 10 pairs of socks. I can take this mode of transportation. It's like you spend so much time trying to decide from choices when if you just had one choice, boom, you're done. So I
Right.
hope that helps. But there is
It
more
it,
to
really,
it.
it actually is very dead. I want to take these time management skills and apply it to my life because like this stuff is very very variable.
Very, very,
Especially
very, very.
especially you talking about productivity. So it
Absolutely.
reminded me of a story of this. I remember reading a book about Kemet, and it said one of these ancient ancestors, or you could say deities, but I say
Hmm.
ancient ancestors that 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 when people look at him, he was up during the day, he was up all night, and people wondering like, do he even sleep? Like, how did
Mm.
he sleep?
Yeah,
But the way that he have his time management seemed supernatural to other people when they look at him.
absolutely.
Uh,
And I find that it's quite funny you should touch on that because people say that, like, Dr. York, how does he sleep? When does he sleep? And then you start to look at the physiology of your body and why you need sleep and how much sleep you need. It's going back to what I was saying. What are you putting into your body? What's the fuel that you're, you know, using for your car, your vehicle? And when you start looking at all these things, you're like, someone says you should have 8 hours sleep. Well, why? Who says 8 hours? Or some will say that you need to have 8 hours sleep. You need to have breakfast. You need to this. Like, but these things, when you analyze them, they actually are not making you productive because you're eating at the wrong times. You're doing so. It's like it's about, is it quantity or is it quality? Because if you sleep for 8 hours and you don't get rest and you still don't feel like you've slept, but yet somebody sleeps for half of that time, 4 hours, but they feel very energized and very charged and filled, they're going to perform more better than the person who had 8 hours. So it's also a matter of your lifestyle and how you manage you, because there are things that are general for everyone, but there are things that are going to be unique to you because you are unique. And so you have to study your being, your body, and what works for you. Like, people don't monitor, like, if I eat this, how does it make me feel? What's the reaction? How do I perform for that day? As opposed to if I have something else. So then you start to look at time it takes for your food to digest. So it's in your system, it's making you not productive because if you, like, for example, if you're eating meat and things that take hours to digest, that's in your system and that's a vibration that's affecting your performance. And then you have to go into the world of athletes and see, because athletes, they're all about competition and trying to beat their records and the high performance. So you start to look at, okay, what makes him the fastest runner, or what makes her or whoever the fastest or the best at that field. And when you do that, you start to see athletes take their, like their routine, their diet, and things very seriously, you see. So that makes them be the best. And then that's a level that's just dealing with physical, like, exercise or whatever. But then the most important part of you is your brain. So now
Right.
you have to look at what makes the brain perform at its optimum. This is why we study, and that because when you're studying, your your computer, and like, you have to feed that computer with the information to give it the ability to be able to function better and to process information, and then the whole point is then you apply that information to your daily life,
Right.
and you find that you're gonna do much better.
Speaking of instead of finding different outfits, just have that one outfit.
Yeah.
Uh I mean to ask you, how do you guys get these cool looking outfits? I don't see them at any store, and I was wondering, like, how do you guys get these
Yeah,
outfits?
it's creativity, and we design and produce them ourselves, and that's what I'm saying. Because again, now when you start to look at, now I was just dealing with me and you having a conversation. Now you multiply that to having a wife, a partner, or someone, and you see how the consumer industry, when you look at females, for example, again, I'm not picking on females, but they are the ones that, like, shopping is designed for, right? Because a female has to really adorn herself, from her hair to her eyebrows to the eyelashes to the lips to the earrings. That's just the head and the face, to the body, to the nails, the shoes. So they have like 20 different things they want to match. They have to make sure that the earrings match with the lipstick, that match with you know, it's like, so when you go to the shops, you find that we are trained to be consumers. So we just buy all of this stuff. Your cubicle or your box where you call your house where you live is filled with all this stuff that you don't even really need. And it goes into how much money you're spending, and then you start to look at us as a people, how much money we will spend on name brands and, just to look good. And we don't feed our minds, and we don't feed the things we need to do to be a lot more productive as a whole, you see. So there is a science to everything, and you're asking some great questions. We've done over 2 hours, and we normally do an hour, so we're gonna have to
Oh,
soon
sorry
round
about
it. And it's all
that.
good, because I like when I'm able to speak about things I've never spoken on before. Like, because if you get asked the same questions, you will answer the same question all the time, and maybe in different ways, and you add more to it because we have a whole library, of information that we can always pull on. But what we're talking about here is things that, it's new. So it's good to, yeah, to kind of explore when we talk about practical things as well, because like you say, how do you get up, how do you perform, how can you manage your time better so you can achieve more, instead of being what we call idol worship. Not
Right.
IDOL. You're just idle, and you have, let's say, 8 hours where you're supposed to be productive, and at the end of the 8 hours you're like, what did I do? You know, if you check the time and you say, "Oh, you know, I watch games. I mean, I watch a movie. I was on social media for." It's like you've wasted, and time is you've wasted a lot of time, and time is one of those things that you can't get back once it's gone. In that sense, so it's
Right.
very important that individually we're productive, but collectively we're even more productive. This is why when you have a system as opposed to, you know, you doing everything yourself, you have a system that runs regularly and it works. So when you're producing things like, you know, you'll have people that will proofread, those will type it, those will put it together, bind. I'm talking about if you're putting a book together, for example. So, you know, Dr. York has systems in place where he would write and then the administration and other people will type, other people will, you know, put the images together, correlate it, and you know, it's a team, it's a effort by many people, and that's why our greatest teachers told us, you know, love first. We have to be able to relate, and unity comes together, and we can do more when we come together. So we say there's power in numbers. You know, what I mean, we're able to do more when you have a team that can work well together. But we've been taught by the programming to be individuals and to try and do everything ourselves. And there's
Right.
so much wastage that comes with that because if you had 10 people and they live together in one community, they can share the bills and share everything. But if you have 10 people that live separately, then you're going to have 10 different internet bills, 10 different telephone bills, 10 different shopping, 10, you know, it's like 10 different TVs, cookers. Like, you got to just learn to be in communities and work together so that you can actually save and be more productive where your money's going and what you're doing. So,
Sure
yeah,
indeed, sure
yeah,
indeed. That's why that's the stuff. That's the type of stuff I strive to be. Like Malachi to York when it comes to time management. You know, there's a point he's like, man, what do you have a love life? You know,
yeah.
or like
And
the
that's funny
deity of
because, yeah, that's
the
one of the, in the case, that's one of the funniest things where they try to say, you know, he had time to do all of these things with, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah
if you're
yeah.
that, okay. And that's funny because if, let's say people say, oh, he had 100 wives, right?
Mm.
Now imagine if you have 100 wives and you've got to give them attention equally, like, you know, even as you say, sexually or whatever, whatever, the amount of energy and time you would use just on that, how are you still able to then outperform everybody else who only has one wife and have all the time in the world, right? But yet
By
he's
10 times,
producing,
by the way.
yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah.
producing all these books, translating everything, speaks all the languages, build communities. But you that has one can't do the same. So obviously, yeah, there are lots of things that when you really use your mind, and the mind is one of those things that he's got a book, the mind. You have to read that mind book to see how it will. There are two books, the mind book and your potential. These two books will help you with time management and productivity because you'll start to know how, why do you make decisions and why do you spend time doing things that are not serving you. You know, that's why when I said idle, I was saying ideally, because a lot of people they spend more time in church and the mosque. If you calculate how much hours they spend in the church or in the mosque, over the years, how much time is just being idle, doing nothing, praying to nobody and waiting for someone to come and save you that's not coming. That's a waste of your energy and time. That's really being idle when you're idol worshiping. So you got to take that energy and utilize it in a way that's going to bring about actual fruits of your labor, you know? So,
Trust me,
yeah,
I'm
great
taking this
question.
in. I'm taking this, I'm soaking this in to the point. People, I know people gonna be like, man, do knowledge sleep? Like, 'cause he up all night and he up all day. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be that type of person. But
Yeah,
my question,
and if you do it right, you know, you'll be like there are people, right, taking this whole time management to another level. There are people who have worked out that they can work 2 hours a day and have the rest of their day to do what they need to do. We were talking about trading, for example. They log onto the computer, they trade for 2 hours. They make more money in 2 hours than somebody who works 9 to 5 for a whole week.
oh yeah,
So who's smarter? Like, You know what I'm saying? Like, and I mentioned systems. There are people who have systems where they're making money whilst they're asleep. You
Mm.
know, so it's all about how you put these things into practice to the point where we all have the same amount of time. But why do people achieve and do more in the same amount of time than you do? It's because you're not, like you say, managing your time properly. We call it the
Right.
24-hour gauge,
And it
24
goes
inch
back to that
gauge.
mindset.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So my question was, sorry, it was that how can a person be part of the movement? Is there
Mm.
like a ritual or something to join, or is there, or are you just being enlightened with the truth and just go and live on?
No, I mean we put out, as you know, classes all around the world, different parts of the country every day, literally. A lot of free information for people to digest, study, read, watch videos. But ultimately, we come together in communities, right? We come together and as one family. So I would say if someone is serious, just like, if you wanted to be a part of any other organization, what you do is you check it out. You find out as much as you can about it, and then you get to know people in the communities. Go to your local bookstores, your local, temples, communities, start being around, visiting, and there's a process. We have, a form that you can join. You can go on the chat. In fact, I'm gonna. Yeah, actually, you've asked me a question. Let me try something and see if it will work. It should do. I'm just gonna share my screen. Right. This is our Nashat store, and as you can see, if you let me move this out of the way. You see this button? It says join us.
Mhm.
That's in the UK. Our official website is the United Sabians Worldwide, as you can see here as well. And again, you can just click on this free registration, and that will take you to a form where it says join member registration, and you literally fill out the form. And it's important because it it takes detail of you, and it also gives you the opportunity to, here for example, where you can upload any documents like your resume, your CV, to show what skills you have and things like that. And once you submit that, you will be contacted and follow through. So it's that simple, and then you just become a part of the community, and then you learn more about, like I mentioned, the different orders. So for example, if you look here, we have the orders, right? The ancient Egyptian order, you Sabaeans in black, the Grand Lodge, the different aspect. Like I was saying to you, this is the Mudrusu Tashrak, the Student Association. And of course, there are different aspects that you can learn about the family for the men, the women, the elders, and the young people. You can learn about who's Dr. York, and there's so much information already on our official United Sabians Worldwide website. So yeah, that's how you would join.
Definitely.
So I hope that
Definitely.
helps.
Anybody who's watching definitely got to go check it out. I'm definitely going to check it out,
Yeah.
and find out everything that's going on with your movement. Because I
Tour.
like a lot of stuff you guys are saying. And it's different and it's unique in a sense. So
And what's
like,
great about what you're doing is that, like I said, it's once you have a community, you're moving together as one. So once you kind of like verify everything, you're happy and you check it out, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to end soon because it's telling me that we're running out of space. But yeah, so then it's like when you come into Wu-Sabat, you're bringing the whole community with you because you're all gonna be aligned. So yeah, yeah.
true, true.
Unfortunately, we have we run out of time, and we've done yeah, it's been really good. It's been a good session, and thank you for your time and your questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same here, man. I really appreciate you giving me these one-on-one.
no problem.
Um, and man, I thank you so much for answering my questions. It definitely give me a brighter perspective on
Mm,
what's about, and
tour.
I just really thank for the opportunity, and for
Yeah,
me.
and if you're not in our Telegram group, join the Telegram group. Attend the classes. We have classes every Saturday, Sunday, and we do. Sorry, Yeah, Sunday in certain parts, and on Tuesday we did a live on YouTube as well. So plug in, and then we can get close. All right.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting to it, man. I'm getting to this YouTube stuff. So like, yeah, so like,
Great,
I'm with
great.
you.
All right. Tawa,
All right, thank you so much.
Tua, Wadu.